Welcome to A Pod Somewhere in Time. I'm your host, John, and I'm here with my co host, Mattias. And on today's episode, we are going to be discussing Iron Maiden's fourth studio album, Peace of Mind. Released on May 16th, 1983, the album would be the first to feature new drummer Nicko McBrain, who had formerly worked with, amongst others, Pat Travers in the band Trust. The album was written and rehearsed around January 1983 on the Isle of Jersey in the English Channel, where they rented a closed for the season hotel called La Chalet. Official recording sessions would begin in February at Compass Point Studios in the Bahamas with now regular producer Martin Birch. Mixing and mastering would also be done by Birch at Electric Ladyland Studios in New York. With 9 songs in total and songwriting contributions coming from everyone except Nicko, the album would find Maiden building on the strengths from Number of the Beast, the album reaching platinum status in the US and the UK. Singles from the album would be Flight of Icarus, backed with a cover of the Montrose song I've Got the Fire. Second single, The Trooper, was backed with a cover of the Jethro Tull song Cross-Eyed Mary. Videos would be made for the songs Flight of Icarus and The Trooper, which would receive heavy rotation on a fairly new MTV. The World Peace Tour would begin on May 2nd in Hull, England, and end on December 18th with a televised performance at Westfalenhall in Dortmund, Germany. A total of 139 shows were performed throughout the tour. The tour was supported by Grand Prix in the UK, Rock Goddess during the first European leg, Saxon Fastway, Coney Hatch, Quiet Riot, and Axe in the US, and by the Michael Schenker Group during the second European leg. Many songs from the album would make appearances on the tour's set list. The Trooper, Revelations, Flight of Icarus, Die With Your Boots On, Where Eagles Dare, Still Life, and To Tame a Land. This tour being the last time that song would be played. All right, Matthias, Peace of Mind. This is a big one. What are your memories and thoughts on this album?
Yeah, like I said in our introductory episode, this was my gateway. This was my first Iron Maiden album. In short, my one of my older cousins had this album when it came out, and it was the first one for me to hear, and it just worked. I don't know why. As a 9-year-old, what are your parameters? Why did I like this album? I really don't know, but it just struck something within me, and yeah, it's one of these albums that, in a way, just changed my life, literally, in so many ways, because Iron Maiden became such an interest for me. Listening to Maiden songs, reading the lyrics, it made me more interested in history in school because of historical events. They sang about stuff like that. And I mean, people I met during the years, friends I've made, all because of going to concerts abroad and meeting people. I mean, the impact is so much bigger than just an album to me in a very profound way. But yeah, I just love this album. It's such a huge part of my life. So actually it's kind of hard to talk about it. I don't know what to say. What do you have to say, John? 'Cause-
Yeah, this is a special one for me too. I mean, as we've talked about in the past episodes, the self-titled was my first Iron Maiden. Then I got Number of the Beast, and I was trying to work this out in my head. It's so hard to remember these things because one, they were so long ago, and time moved at a different pace back then than it does today. But I believe that I probably got Number of the Beast somewhere in the middle towards the later half of 1982. Uh, Number of the Beast came out in March of 82. So I really wasn't kind of there with it was like I felt like I was trying to play catch up and there was a lot of stuff coming at me at that time as I was just discovering heavy metal. It was like I was sort of opening a Pandora's box. I was
mm,
opening the door, and there was just, it seemed like there was just so much stuff that I was discovering. And, but for peace of mind, I was there when it happened. That was like, okay, I'm into this band. I'm ready for them. Now, I don't think I was aware because again, back then, low information age. I probably wasn't aware of exactly when the album was coming out, but I probably saw a video on MTV and was like, "Oh
mm,
wow, the new Iron Maiden's out. I'm getting this." So I was felt like this is the album that I'm here for when it came out. I'm
mm,
here for this now. Whereas I was playing catch up with the band before this, and I loved the first record. It was a 10 out of 10 for me. And then I got Number of the Beast and I was like, wow, this is even better. And then I got Peace of Mind and it was like, oh my gosh, this is even my expectations. It was like it just kept getting better with
mm.
everything that I heard from Iron Maiden.
Yeah.
So this album always has a special place for me because it was I was there for it when it came out. They were getting played on MTV a lot at this point. The Flight of Icarus video. I remember just loving that video. Again, you got to remember, low information age. You're not seeing pictures of the band unless you're seeing it in
Mm,
magazines. And
mm,
up until this point, as I've mentioned, I lived in a very rural town. I didn't have access to any magazines, but around this time, I started to get access to magazines like Hit Parader and Circus and things like that. So I also have very fond memories of pictures of the band from this era. Nicko with his really short hair and his really young
mm,
face, and Steve with the blue sparkle bass,
mm,
So I was cutting out pictures of them from magazines from this era kind of moving forward. So I have that memory. I remember I bought this guitar tablature book and it was pretty, the tablature was terrible inside it. I might still have it. I remember looking at it somewhere in the last couple of years and it's just like the tablatures are absolutely terrible. But at the time had just started playing guitar and it was something for me to go by. And then there were pictures inside it too. There was a section in the middle, I think, that had some color pictures, and then there were some black and white pictures. And I looked for it before this episode started. There's this picture where I believe it's Steve and Nicko are sitting and the other guys are standing behind them. And that was
mm,
a picture that I took it out of that guitar tab book and I hung it on my wall. It was a black
mm,
and white picture, but like I said, you did the best you could at that time. And I just remember right from the word go, right from Where Eagles Dare, I'm not even sure if I was conscious that there was a different drummer here. I mean, maybe I was. I don't even remember because I was buying this stuff on cassette, and cassettes back then typically just had the cover, the front cover, and if you were lucky on the inside of the J card. At this point, you weren't getting much extra info. You were just getting maybe the song titles, and that's it. And so I might have been conscious that there was a new drummer in the band, but I just remember loving the mix. This might be my favorite Iron Maiden mix. It sort of jumped out at me. It had this very clear but punchy kind of sound to it that I really, really liked. As a young starting up bass player, I thought the bass sounded great on Peace of Mind. I still
mm,
do. I think it
mm,
might be my favorite Steve Harris bass sound. It's got this
mm,
nice compressed
mm,
right in the middle of the mix sound. The guitars sound great. Bruce sounds great. It it felt like an album where I'm sure I didn't think of this at that time, but Bruce is more now in the band, so maybe that contributed to. And I think as time has gone on, I think most people recognize Peace of Mind as being sort of a high point for the band, if not them peaking. I mean, there's some people that
mm,
feel that the band peaked with Peace of Mind. And I
mm,
can understand that because where if you sit in a room with 10 Maiden fans, and you talk about Number of the Beast, you're going to have people arguing about Invaders. You're going to have people arguing about Gangland.
mm,
But on Peace of Mind, I mean, of course,
mm,
everybody has songs they like a little bit more than others, but there's not really much to dislike about Peace of Mind. There's really no weak points in Peace of Mind for me. And I think most Maiden fans are in agreement with that, that it's from top to bottom. It's a really, really strong record. It's got the classics on it, like The Trooper. Uh, so it's a really strong record. It's age. There's a little bit of burnout factor with this album. I find myself like when I was preparing for this, I listened to it yesterday and I started with side two because I find
Mm,
there's a little outside of the Trooper stuff like Still Life, Quest for Fire, To Tame a Land. They feel a little fresher than side one, where stuff
mm,
like Revelations and Flight of Icarus, like I've heard those songs just a million times. But this is a very special album because again, I was there when it came out. I was also fully into heavy metal at this point. Like 80, 81, 82, I was just like, oh, what's this? What's this? And I'm getting this, I'm getting that. So by the time Peace of Mind comes out, I had Blizzard of Oz and Diary of a Madman. I had
mm,
Heaven and Hell and I had Mob Rules. I had British Steel and Point of Entry. I don't remember if
mm.
Screaming for Vengeance was out yet. But I
No.
had this core foundation, of I had my bands. I was like, okay, Priest, Maiden, Sabbath, Ozzy. Dio hadn't put out his first solo album yet, I don't think. But this was just like, yeah, man, it was like a roller coaster that was just starting to pick up speed, and
Mm,
all this stuff was coming at me. And it was just like one great album after another. I mean, this is just a glorious time for heavy metal at this point, just legendary killer album after killer album. And I couldn't get enough of this stuff. And I mean, this album just sat. I have a strange memory of listening to this record. My dad had wasn't really quite a boom box in the traditional sense, but it was a tape player with like one speaker on this old beat up thing. And he used to use it like if he was painting or something, he would play music on it. So it had paint all over it and it was all dirty. And I remember sitting listening to this album in the garage through, what was a pretty junky tape player, but just having this kind of moment like, oh my gosh, like this is just so great. I just couldn't like get enough of it. It was like, this is so great. This is heavy metal. This is what I want to be around heavy metal. I want to think about it all the time. It was just sort of this glorious moment where it just seemed like all this stuff was coming together for me. Sabbath, Maiden, Priest. It was just like I got to the top of the mountain and it was like, here's this shiny gold temple or something, with all
mm,
these treasures inside it. And it just seemed like it was every time I turned around, there was just something that was blowing my mind. And this was one of those records. And although there is some burnout factor with it, I still have to respect that from top to bottom. It's just a fantastic record. It's such an important record to me with Iron Maiden. It's a solid gold, 10 out of 10. So fantastic album. Great, great memories.
yeah. You talk about the competition there, which is quite interesting. I'm a few years younger than you, and this was, like I said, was my first Maiden album that I got into, and the first one I heard, the first one I knew. So Bruce was the Maiden singer for me. Nicko McBrain was the drummer for Iron Maiden for me, and I was yet to get into the other bands. My aforementioned cousin, who had Peace of Mind, he also bought the Defenders of the Faith album by
Mm,
Judas Priest. So that was also one of the very first albums I got into. Uh, my competition was more Saxon and MSG, Michael Schenker Group. I got a few of those albums pretty early on as a 9-year old going towards 10. It's also quite interesting when you talk about growing up in a rural area. Like we talked about this before, I did also. But in Sweden, we had this like pop magazine called OK, and they put out a lot of issues. And since hard rock and heavy metal was quite a thing in Sweden pretty early on, they had like and they these magazines had almost all pictures. Well,
Hmm.
of course they had like journalists writing articles, but it wasn't like in-depth interviews.
Right, right.
It was more pictures.
Yeah.
And so I know for sure that I've seen pictures of the band. I knew what Nicko looked like, and I mean on the record sleeve itself for Peace of Mind, this great photo of the band sitting by the dinner
Table.
table.
Food
Let's
for
talk about
Thought,
that.
which was
Yeah,
originally going to be the title of the record, was
it,
originally Food for Thought. So that picture on the inside makes sense. If the title of the record was Food for Thought,
yeah,
that's sort of, if anybody's out there seen that picture, it sort of makes sense now when you think about that they were thinking about naming the album
yeah,
Food for
absolutely.
Thought before they
And
changed it to Peace of Mind.
you also mentioned the televised Dortmund concert from it was recorded in December of '83, but that show was also broadcasted in Sweden, but later in 1984,
Mm.
and that actually was some sort of televised metal festival. They had bands like Def Leppard, Crocus, Quiet Riot, which was surprisingly enough the only non-European band on the bill. Ozzy was there, Judas Priest, Scorpions, and MSG, and of course Iron Maiden. And this show was a bit over 3 hours long.
Wow.
And many of my friends who had like video recorders, they taped this, of course. We didn't get a video in my family for at least 4 or 5 years after '83, I think. But I mean, so you went over to people's place, you
Mm.
watched the whole show with all these bands, and Iron Maiden was the first one on. It was the
Wow.
first one. I don't think they were the first to play the actual festival, but it was like the first one they had featured on the televised version. And I mean, what an introduction
Yeah.
to to heavy metal with all the. Of course, let's be honest, maybe Crocus isn't one of my favorite bands, but I mean the rest of them was like, and Def Leppard at that time had just put out Pyromania,
Yeah.
so there was all hits,
Yeah.
and I mean Quiet Riot were going very big too, even though for an European audience they're not that huge as they became in the US a bit later. But yeah, that show, and if you talk about with hard rockers in my age in Sweden, that show is a huge thing.
Wow.
Um,
Yeah, I didn't know that because I don't think that that was shown in the US. I definitely don't remember seeing any kind of live Bruce until y- Live After Death. That's the only time that stuff like that came out. So yeah, I don't think that that was shown in the US. And it's interesting because 83 is also, I believe, the year that Metal Health came out. So the whole, if it's not 83, it's 80, yep, 83.
mm,
Metal Health came out in 83. Shout at the Devil came out in 83. So the whole LA hair thing is glam thing is starting to kick up. So basically it's like metal is really starting to explode in like 82, 83. So
mm,
Peace of Mind is kind of, right in there with all of that, right? The whole thing just sort of blowing up.
yeah, and talking about you mentioned Food for Thought and the first title they had for the album, but the sleeve that it put out, of course, is very well known. Peace of Mind. The idea came from Steve Harris, who had the idea of putting uh, Eddie in a straitjacket in a padded cell. And your friend, good friend Martin Popoff, has made this Excellent book. It's called Run for Cover: The Art of Derek Riggs. And in this book, there is an alternate first version of the album. See if I can find it here.
Wow.
So you can see it's not done properly.
Yeah.
I think the band saw it and said, that's not working. And I think that in this interview that what Martin made with Derek for this book, he said that the instruction he got was have Eddie sitting in a padded cell, chained up. So he's sitting down. But then when they saw it, I think the manager Rod Smallwood said that this is not aggressive enough. We need aggression. This is heavy metal, and this is
Yeah.
yeah, it is. It is much better, isn't it?
Yeah, and I just noticed the old one, it's got the chain is sort of in front of him. And there it's like coming out from the side of his neck and it's in
Yeah,
front of him, but it's sort of loose. And I think that gives the picture and the not used one, it looks kind of strange in the proportions and everything. It'll look kind of weird. And yeah, having him sitting and everything. So yeah, the
he
final
looks more
version was
like
much better.
he looks more like a victim, I think, and
Yeah.
that's not super good. But I mean, yeah, it works better with the more aggressive style that's on the finished artwork for Peace of Mind.
Yeah.
And another fun thing that you on the like I showed before, the very picture, the tray here with the brain, it is actually a cooked sheep brain with some cooked vegetables.
Yummy.
So yeah, and even that place where they took the photo, it's an like you mentioned, they wrote and rehearsed most of the album on Jersey, which is in the English Channel, but it's outside of the UK. And they took the band photos in a place called St. Owen's Manor. And just for fun, I had to check online and see if I could find anything about this place. And I have good news, all Maiden fans out there. You can actually rent this place for like a wedding reception or something. Or so next time I'm getting married, I'm going to I'm going to book St. Owen's Manor on Jersey.
That would be also a great wedding photo, like everybody sitting at a table, like that inside picture, the bride and the groom and everything, and a table laid out like the guys there. Yeah, that's fascinating.
That's a life goal for me now. Not to get married again, but to
Yeah.
go there. And another fun thing that is this the glove here with his signature, Derek Riggs' signature.
Yeah.
So on the back side of the sleeve, it is a gatefold one. There's this, and it's inspired by a comic from the '60s called The Steel Glove. And while we're at this, talking about the sleeve, I have this one. This is I'm now showing a Korean version of the Peace of Mind album, and they thought in Korea that the South Korea, that is of course, the original illustration was way too aggressive and dangerous looking. So they have the photo of the band instead. And
Mm.
you can, of course, see here that you can't show a brain on a sleeve. So they put this sticker here that says Iron Maiden includes Where Eagles Stare.
Wow.
Another really weird thing about this album is that South Korea in the 80s were a military state, a military dictatorship. So they had to have all the songs going through the censors. So on this album, it's only 5 tracks.
Oh, wow.
So most of the songs about war and the one about suicide was deemed too dangerous for the
Wow.
youth of South Korea. So this is just a five song version
Oh my
of
gosh.
Peace of Mind. That's weird.
Yeah, I never knew that. That's so what five made the cut then?
So yeah, the
Revelations.
510, yeah, Where Eagles Dare. Perhaps they missed that. It's
Yeah.
about the Second World War. It's Revelations. It's Flight of Icarus, and on the B side, it's Quest for Fire and To Tame a Land.
Wow. Wow, that's an interesting little collector's item. Yeah, I'd like to comment on we talked about Clive Burr's departure at the end of our Number of the Beast episode and Nicko arriving in the band. And I
Mm,
think in the same way that Bruce shows up with more vocal range and a more acrobatic singer, and this allows the band to sort of push into new territory. Uh, there was probably a similar effect with Nicko. Nicko is a more chops heavy drummer than Clive was. Clive was a little bit more straight ahead, kind of a high energy guy, but still straight ahead compared to Nicko's style. Uh, I think this album and the next are probably my favorite playing from Nicko. Uh, I will say that at times it's maybe a little busy for my taste, but at other times it works, like in Where Eagles Dare. Uh, and he does know how to sit back and hold it in the pocket and just drive it, like something like The Trooper, for instance, or Die With Your Boots On. I really like his drumming in Flight of Icarus. I think the drums sound great on here. I
mm,
think I remember noticing that when I got this record, that the drums had this nice kind of bright sound to them, like a lot of cymbals, and the snare had a real sort of crack to it,
mm,
whereas Clive's drums had a bit more of a darker, rounder sound to them.
mm,
Nicko's drums had a real crack to them, and there was a lot of cymbals in his playing. Like he played the ride cymbal a lot, and so there was a lot of like ding 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 and you sort of had like
mm,
that kind of sound going on. He wasn't, when I think about it, maybe we'll have to ask Henrik, our friend Henrik, the drummer, about this. Does he favor his ride cymbal more than he does his hi-hat? Because in my
mm,
mind, it seems like he does that more, plays off of his ride than he does that sort of traditional guys
mm,
playing much more off of their hi-hat and then just using the ride, just as sort of an extra thing. But yeah, he definitely adds this extra element of excitement and sort of busyness to the drum playing that takes everything kind of to another level, like To Tame a
mm,
Land and stuff like that. Still Life, Quest for Fire. Yeah, I mean everything. He really kind of jumps out, and his personality really comes out in the band here. You hear it and you notice him. In other words, he's a
mm,
guy that has a personality on the drum set, and that really comes through. And I think too, this being Bruce's second record, he's settled into the band now. Although we talked about this on our Number of the Beast episode, he's uncredited on that record, but we suspect, and from talking to him, that he was involved in some of the writing on that. But I think here we really get Bruce involved in the songwriting.
oh yeah, oh yeah,
He becomes now a major player in the songwriting. Like for instance, Revelations is credited just to Bruce,
mm,
and it's a very very Bruce song. This is sort of the
mm,
introduction, if you will. There's maybe Children of the Damned has that Bruce feel, but Revelations is really like this is a Bruce song and it fits right into the band. It doesn't sound odd, but it
mm,
sounds like it's adding another dimension to the band. Works
mm,
really well, but it adds sort of another dimension to what the band is doing. So yeah, so we get that here. Bruce now fully landing as a singer. He gets a co-write on Flight of Icarus, Die With Your
I,
Boots On, yeah, and Sun and Steel. And
yeah,
we get this sort of songwriting partnership that will go on through Maiden and
mm,
even outside of Maiden between Adrian and Bruce with Flight of Icarus and Sun and Steel being
yeah.
co-writes between the two of them. I would almost say here's a good trivia for you. I mean, how many strictly Steve Harris, Bruce Dickinson co-writes are there in the Maiden catalog? It tends to be, I always kind of picture in my head, it's like Bruce and Adrian have this sort of special songwriting connection that the two of them
Mm,
click. Steve is kind of on his own, and occasionally he gets another person kind of does a co-write with him. But I always kind of felt like maybe the Steve co-writes weren't necessarily like true 50-50 splits. They were more like Steve wrote a song and maybe somebody added a riff or something like a little piece to it. And then that's
mm,
how they got a writing credit. I could be wrong on that, but that's just sort of a gut feeling
mm.
that Steve's more of a guy that writes by himself, whereas Bruce is a guy that likes to collaborate and he seems to have this
Mm.
special chemistry with Adrian and that starts showing up here.
There are a few co-writes just between Bruce and Steve, but they are few, I'd say.
Yeah.
But if you keep on listening to this pod, we will tell everything
Stay
as we
tuned.
stay tuned.
In fact, for your trivia assignment, see if you can figure out how many Steve Harris, Bruce Dickinson co-writes are. I mean, for Steve, we get sole writing credit on Where Eagles Dare, The Trooper, Quest for Fire, and To Tame a Land. We get a Dave Murray, Steve Harris co-write on Still Life. And well, here's one right here. Die with Your Boots On is Smith,
Mm,
Dickinson, and Harris.
mm,
So there's one where Steve and but then again, I just have this sneaking suspicion that it's like it was basically Bruce and Adrian that wrote that song, and Steve maybe inserted a little section or something
mm.
somewhere, and he's kind of snuck in on the writing credits on that one because it sounds like a Bruce Adrian song to me. But
Yeah, we'll get there.
yeah. All
So,
right.
shall we start to talk about the various songs?
Yeah, let's jump into
Mm,
it. All right. Well, the album, speaking of Nicko, the album starts off with Where Eagles Dare, and this has got to be, when you talk about legendary drum intros, this has got to be on your list somewhere right there with Over the Mountain. And, you hear this, and it's just a fantastic drum part. I keep
mm.
asking you this one of these days. I'm going to learn how to pronounce the name of this, but it's that show. Uh, in Sweden, Umara or Uvel or something like that.
Ullevi.
Ullevi. And
Ullevi.
I don't know if
Yeah,
they start with Where Eagles Dare, but wherever it is in the
yeah,
show, do they start with
yeah.
Where Eagles Dare? Right. There's like sort of the sound of like gunfire and airplanes and stuff like that. And then you just hear Nico do this like, "Yeah," and then play that. And the crowd, when that riff kicks in, you just see like thousands of people, their arms go. I mean, what a show opener, man. I mean, what an album opener. I mean, that is
Yeah,
just, it's just like Invaders, sort of that same concept of like, we're just gonna come out cannons blasting, but here
yeah,
it's even more effective. That drum fill just comes right out. And when that main riff kicks in, man, it is like, whoa, that is just such a cool riff. It totally captures too like the vibe of the song, this sort of like battle airplanes, this just kind of thing. That riff is just has such a let's see, let's run out into our airplanes and fly into battle, kind of vibe to it. Bruce sounds great on it. uh the band is just so tight on that main riff. I love the guitar solo section, the way it sort of
mm,
has this floating, like they're in the air
yeah.
type of feel, and there's all the dive on, and you hear the airplane fire and stuff. That is just fantastic. And one of my favorite Maiden moments, if I had to make a top 10 very specific Maiden moments, there's one of them in this song where coming out of the solo section, where they start climbing up and the bass does this really high note, doo 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 doo, and then they go into that
Mm,
dun doo da 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 dun doo da 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 dun doo da da doo da da dun doo da 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 dun doo. That is so cool. Coming out of that big open section where there's those big hanging chords, and all of a sudden it just gets like super super tight and concise right there. I just absolutely love that. I can never get in. Whenever I'm always waiting for that section to come up. It is just such a cool section, the way it all tightens up. And then it sort of moves up like two frets. Boom, ba-da-da-da, boom, ba-ba-da, and the thing just sort of goes up. Ba-da-da-da, ba-da-da-da, and it goes back into that main riff. I mean, just man, so, so cool. And I just can remember that as a kid, like hearing that and just being like, oh my God, oh my, this, I can't believe this. Like, this is so cool. Just going from section to section and being like, I want to go back and listen to that again. I think I even sort of remember like getting it and like just having to listen to that song again before I even went on to the rest of the record. I was just like, I have to hear this again. It just like there was no like, yeah, man, I think I got to listen to this one a couple times to decide if I like it. No, it was just like, oh my gosh, this is like so cool. you know, so
Yeah.
love it. I mean, if we were making a greatest album openers, this would definitely be very high up on my list.
Yeah. Yeah, I really love this song too. And before we started to record here, we talked about that we've listened to the album one more time before doing this, and it's like you said it was one of your five top most listened to albums, and for me, it's probably like the top three most listened to albums in my entire life. So, did we really need to listen to this again? But if we, see if we can find something new on it. But yeah, always makes me smile a bit. Putting you have the vinyl and you just lower the needle, put it on, and I mean, imagining someone in the world thinking before, yeah, they got a new drummer now. I wonder if he's any good. Dropping the needle, and then it's just. I mean, that must be like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Okay,
Yeah,
the man has arrived.
yeah.
He's there now. It's really funny. There's a funny trivia about that very intro because Steve had a song, and it is in this kind of odd signature. The drum pattern is quite odd. It's I don't know how to count stuff like that. I'm not a proper musician. I'm just posing as one. But uh, Steve asked Nicko, said that, yeah, I got this song, and I think we should open up with like a drum fill, or just drums for you to just do your thing. So Nicko, and this was while they were rehearsing in Jersey, and so Nicko thought about it, and he came up with this in his own words, like a huge drum, almost like a solo part. And Steve said, "Nah, that. It's too much. It has to be shorter, much shorter." And I tried something else, and Steve, nah, it's not working. No, you have to come up with something shorter. And what, according to different sources, what actually happened in the end was that Steve suggested the intro. So I think there's one interview where he says that he tapped it out like drumming on the
Yeah.
table or something with his fingers. And I think there's one interview with Nicko where he says that uh, he tried to have Steve sit behind the drum kit to play it to him, but since he can't play the drums, he ended up just singing like the
Yeah.
intro for him, and then like singing the drum part for the very song, like do do kaka do kaka
Yeah.
do kaka. I mean,
Yeah.
and then it is quite labor intensive for any drummer. So
Yeah.
apparently they when they have played this song on later tours, Nicko doesn't really been like very enthusiastic about it being so early in the set because he has to be properly
Yeah.
warmed up to
Yeah.
play that part. And I mean, it's just a great song. Like I think most of you listening know this song. The lyric is based on a book by Alistair MacLean with the same name, and it was also filmed, of course, with Clint Eastwood and Richard Burton in the leading roles. And it's a great film. And the opening title music for the film was used as the intro for the what they played over the PA before they kicked off the concert on the World Peace Tour. So, and that I wrote it down here. The main theme is composed by Ron Goodwin, and good
Okay.
for him. It's a great one. And that music also has a lot of snare. It's like ga 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 rakatakatang, ga 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 takatakatung. So I mean,
Okay.
maybe Steve got some inspiration about the drums from the film music. What do we know? But I've never heard him mention that. But I mean, it's really good. And yeah, just like you said, the solo, it's Dave Murray playing the solo with all the diabombs and everything. And listening to the album now, before we recorded this, I tried to think: is the machine gun fire, is that a bit naff, or is it cool? I'm so used to it. I've been listening to this record since 1983. I don't
Yeah.
know, but I mean, I'm just so
As
used
a
to it.
kid,
But
I dug it. I ate it up. I
yeah,
mean, maybe now in this day and age, it does sound a little dated, but I don't know. It's cool. I'm totally
yeah.
fine with it.
But like you said, Dave's solo is just fantastic. I love Where Eagles there. A few people I've spoken to over the years think that it's a bit too repetitive with when the main riff comes back after the solo with all the
Yeah.
repetitions before Bruce starts to sing again. Yeah, but it's a good riff. It's a good part. So it's not like I'm bothered with it. But I think that a more strict and a bit more harsh songwriting general would have just cut that, I think. But
It is the
I,
third longest song on the record, so it is
yeah,
kind of brave to start off with a song
yeah.
quite that long.
But I just love Where Eagles Dare. It's one of my favorites.
Yeah. All right. Well, next is Revelations, and this is a Bruce writing credit, sole writing credit, and it is kind of quintessential Bruce. It's very melodic. It's got a huge chorus to it. I love the kind of start stop thing in the verse. Da 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 ba da da ba da da and when it goes into like the arpeggiated guitars, boom, 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 and the bass is playing that bass line. That's fantastic. It's got that sort of uplifting feel to it. Bruce's vocal on this is just fantastic. One of my favorite Bruce moments coming into that last verse when he does bind all of us together. He sort of raises the vocal melody there a little bit in that spot. Amazing. It's got the time change in it. Yeah, so just a fantastic. Guitar solos are great in it. Bruce is great in it. I love the lyrical matter of it. And it was kind of, you could say that maybe it occupies the same space as Children of the Damned, in the sense that it's got the acoustic guitars and
Mm.
it's got, the verse kind of comes down and then it builds up. But to me, this is just great songwriting, and it's just like elevate. I mean, I love Children of the Damned, but this is like even more kind of focused in and refined, and the lyrics, the melody line, yeah, just fantastic song.
It really is. And you talk about the lyrics, and I mean, if I didn't know, listening to the words, it's so much like powerful images that does this really actually mean anything, or is it just cool words and cool lines? But I've read this interview where Bruce goes into detail, and even at one point when me and Henrik talked to Bruce, and we asked about Revelations, and he was going into like every single line has some sort of meaning to it, referring to Christian, Hindu
Yeah.
religion and philosophy, and it also draws a bit from the philosophy of Aleister Crowley, the Satanist, and but I have to be honest. Even though I like the words and I like the images that it sort of provokes. I don't really understand this. I'm too stupid, I think, for the lyrics, and I think that Bruce sort of somewhere he said that yeah maybe he was trying a bit too hard
But
to
I
to
love, I can see where this was planted. I'm looking at the lyrics right now, and I can see where this was planted in me that I like these kind of lyrics that use like symbolism, like she came to me with a serpent's kiss as the eye of the sun rose on her lips. Moonlight
mm,
catches silver tears. I cry, you know, so
yeah
we lay in a black and that's sort of like silver tears, you know, just sort
yeah
of this sort of like what exactly does it mean? Who knows? But it's like just sort of cool little imagery. And I mean, Sabbath did that too to a certain extent. You know, you think of songs like Symptom of the Universe and things like that. And so I always loved that kind of thing. And it's funny when I look back and I think about both of us are in bands, both of us write music, and with the stuff that I write and the lyrics that I write, I can see kind of it's sort of like they say, you know, you learn how to speak from your parents. So you have
mm,
certain mannerisms and certain words you use from your parents. Well, it's like I can see myself a little bit subconsciously that, hey, yeah, this is I liked this kind of imagery. I didn't necessarily even need to know exactly what he was singing, but it just sounds really cool. Serpent's kiss,
mm,
silver tears, black embrace, you know, these
mm,
are all words. Black abyss, you know,
mm,
these are all words that just sound really cool on their own. And as a kid, you know, it just added to the whole like, wow, this is so, you know, black abyss, silver tears, you know, it's so like this isn't AC/DC, have a drink on me. You know, this is like something a little bit more like, you know, the symbols and the imagery and stuff like that. So,
mm. And I think most people who have the album have seen that the first verse is indeed from a hymn called, like the first line is, "Oh God of Earth and
yeah.
Altar," and that was written by a guy who was like an author, philosopher, debateur called his name was Gilbert Keith Chesterton, and he wrote the words in 1906, and I had to find because I kind of suspected that he didn't actually write the music also, and I was indeed right. I couldn't really find who wrote the music, but on some while I was browsing the internet and I tried to find like old scores and see if there was some sort of information, and I ended up on a British site with I think it was named like Hymnal or something like that,
Hmm.
where you could find old charts for old hymns. And what I could find was that it's a Welsh hymn melody, first dated in 1865, and it's from a place in Wales called Llangolfan. Llangolfan.
Okay.
I have to, even the pronunciation there is it's spelled with a double L in the beginning, like Langloffan. But
Okay.
the double L in Welsh is supposed to be where you press the air out of your cheeks. So
Okay.
I asked my friend Chris Dale, who is from Wales, like, how do I actually pronounce this? I'm going to be on a pod. I got to get this right. So it's an old melody. It's from 1865. Bruce is, he just stole that, and like many people know, it's something. The hymn is quite well known in the UK, and he used to sing it when he went to school. So I think pretty much you said it all about the song. I just love this song. It has a huge impact on the way I listen to music and what kind of music I like. And I think I would even go as far and say that my love for slower and grander types of metal, like doom metal and that stuff like that, uh, I think comes from this very song
Hmm. Yeah,
because
interesting point.
it is kind of doomy, and
Yeah.
it just keeps evolving with all the pieces and parts. And I mean the dee doo doo da da do. It's
Yeah.
so beautiful. I just love this song. And you talked also about Steve's bass sound on this album, and it's been for all you nerds, it's been suggested, and I think actually this is true that he's so well known to play his Fender Precision bass.
Yeah.
But the bass sound on Peace of Mind is quite different from like the earlier albums and
Yeah.
albums recorded after. And I read somewhere on the internet, on the internet, everything is true.
So it must be true.
Yeah, but it was suggested that it's Ibanez Roadster, and we know that he had such a bass. And since the sound it doesn't really sound like a Fender precision bass. So I tend to think that it's probably true. I think this is recorded on an Ibanez Roadster bass, uh, and also just adding one little thing that there is this uh, an opinion that is almost like a truth among Maiden fans that Steve plays his best bass parts on songs he has not
Yeah.
written himself. And
Yeah.
I think for Revelations, that is very true. His bass parts for this song is just out of this world. It's so
Yeah.
beautiful and well composed. And yeah, so
Yeah.
congratulations, Bruce, for having
Yeah.
Steve Harris fulfilling your vision with this one.
Yeah. Okay,
Mhm.
next is Flight of Icarus. This is a Adrian Smith, Bruce Dickinson composition. I remember the video for this one and just totally digging it because it had the clips of them in the studio and they just look so
Mm.
cool. I think Steve's got the headphones on playing his bass and everything, and Bruce is like right up on the microphone, and they've got some other things clipped in there, some images. Uh, So yeah, the video for this is great. The intro is I always love the intro. Da da dun 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 dun. The tempo is like perfect. This is a song that I don't really like when they play the if whenever they play this live, they seem to play it too fast. This is a
Mm.
song that it sits in a really nice pocket. It's definitely not a slow song. It's maybe a slightly faster mid-tempo type of song. The chorus is great, the layered vocals. I love when Bruce does the line in the verse. Now the crowd breaks and a young boy appears, looks the old man in the eye as he spreads his wings and shouts at the crowd, "In the name of God, my Father, I'll fly." I mean, that's
Oh.
just great, great stuff, and that sort of climb up thing. And Steve's bass line, do dad, do dad, do dad, do da, ba 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 da da, and the way he does that with the
Mm.
drums, da 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 da, boo dad. For those interested, you can find an isolated drum and bass track from this, the two of them playing
Mm.
together, and it's just that section right there. They're just really tight and locked in on that, which I think is just great. It's a shame that this song was sort of abandoned from their set list for many years. It's recently
Mm.
been brought back, and it's been said that Steve doesn't like the song, and I don't know if that's because he didn't write it. Maybe that sort of plays into it. But as far as like them having a recognizable song to people who don't follow Iron Maiden, if you grew up in the 80s, this might have been it. This video got played a lot. Like, I'm going to say that this got played more than the Trooper video. This video was in probably this and Run to the Hills, the most played video. Maybe 2 minutes to midnight because they were also, but it got played a lot. So it's sort of shocking that to somebody who isn't a Maiden fan, this is one of their more recognizable songs. And so it's sort of a shock that they abandoned it from their set list for so many years because a casual fan definitely knows this song.
Yeah, they brought it back in for the Legacy of the Beast tour. They hadn't played it since the 80s then.
Yeah.
And I think the version they did when they played it like a few years back, only now they played it in the right tempo, not like they played it in the 80s because they just played it too fast. And apparently, that's according to Bruce, they had like a huge argument in the studio where because Steve told Nicko to speed it up a bit, you know. And Adrian and Bruce wrote this song were very particular about the tempo, and rightly so, I must say, because I think the tempo is perfect for the
Yeah.
recorded version. When you play it a bit too fast, it just loses the groove, doesn't it? It
Hmm.
just
Yeah, it
it
turns
doesn't.
into a typical maiden gallop where even though this
Yeah.
is a maiden gallop, because it's at that sort of mid-tempo thing, it has more of a groove, like you said. That's a way to
Mm.
describe it, is has more of a groove kind of to the verse feel, but when it's sped up too much, it just sounds like a typical kind of Iron Maiden gallop.
Yeah, and it's worth pointing out that the drums are quite unique. I mean, he doesn't play a ride or a hi-hat for almost all of the song. It's just a bit of ride cymbal at the very end where they at the
Yeah.
very end of the song, which is quite unusual. So it's a clever arrangement, very well executed by the new boy in the band, Nicko McBrain, I think. Um, Talking about the lyrics, Flight of Icarus, I think most people know the Greek myth of Icarus who flew too close to the sun. But apparently, I read this excerpt in one of Luis Mariano Rodriguez's books where Bruce is saying something about he had this idea all the way back from when he was in Samson, and the idea he just used the myth, the Greek myth of Icarus, but he sort of twisted it around about parents pushing their kids too far. Like, so in this case, the father is the one who is like pushing his son to fly too close to the sun. Uh, it's not that super obvious, I think, but it's nonetheless it's quite interesting. This song was also, I think, my favorite song when I heard the album, Flight of Icarus, and I didn't know about any singles. I didn't know about any videos. To me, it was just one of the songs on the album, and I just loved Flight of Icarus. It was like the my favorite song of the album.
Yeah.
Um, and I think the solos are quite good too. It's Dave and Adrian, and for the very last bit, it's Dave playing the solo. So it is an Adrian song musically, but he let Dave play most of the solos on this one, which I think is quite generous of him. But absolutely great song, and I was really really excited when they brought it back to play it in on the Legacy of the Beast tour. I love Flight of Icarus.
Yeah. Okay, next, Die With Your Boots On. This is an Adrian Smith, Bruce Dickinson, Steve Harris co-write. Okay, if were to point to any weaker moment on this album, this is it for me. It's, I don't want to say a throwaway song, but and I don't want to say it's kind of a silly song. I think what the whole like, so if you're gonna die, if you're gonna die, if you're gonna die, if you're gonna die, like those background vocals. Uh, I don't know. This one always just kind of sat there for me. I mean, the chorus is kind of catchy. But man, coming off of Flight of Icarus, Where Eagles Dare, Revelations, this one just seems like a little bit stock, a little straight ahead. Good song, but it's not on the level that the songs were before it. So it does seem like a tiny bit of a letdown. And I kind of don't like uh, I don't know. There's just something about this song. The whole like the no point asking when it is, no point asking who's to go. It's an okay song. It's just that if the first three songs are 10 out of 10s for me, this is like an 8 out of 10, which I mean isn't a terrible thing, but again, when you have Revelations, Flight of Icarus, Where Eagles Dare, this one just kind of sounds like it's just like kind of a rock and roll number. It's just sort of maybe they threw this one together jamming in the rehearsal room.
Mm. apparently all of them, Bruce, Adrian, and Steve, all came up with various musical parts for the song, and I think, and then Bruce wrote the lyrics for it. So Bruce was indeed involved in writing the music for this song as well. Uh, I really like Die With Your Boots On. I don't think maybe it's not, or it isn't the best song on the album, but it's a song that always makes me happy. It's a song that just feels good. It got this driving energy, and I must say, I can't imagine Clive Burr playing a drum part like the one that Nicko does for this song,
Yeah.
because it just hangs there, but it's still driving. It's still going very much forward, but it's like a laid back forward in a very typical Nicko McBrain style. It's what makes him unique. And on this song, I think what is, and listening to previous recordings with Nicko on, I mean, like Trust or Pat Travers, earlier recordings he done with other artists and bands. This is more of a sort of, this is more in the style of the old Nicko, not the Maiden Nicko, but the old Nicko. And it just got such a groove. And again, it's a song that it just puts me in a good mood every time I hear it. I really enjoy Die With Your Boots On. But it's not the best one on the album, that's for sure. But I mean, still, I can't think of this album not having Die With Your Boots On.
Yeah, and it does provide a little bit of levity, a little bit of fun. It
Mm,
sounds like a fun song. And after the first three songs that are pretty, from a mood perspective, pretty heavy, pretty intense, this one is
mm,
kind of more of a, kind of having fun in the studio type of thing. So it does serve its purpose on the record, which sets up our next one, The Trooper, Steve Harris number. This is a legendary. When you talk about songs that the difference between rock and metal, this is a metal song. This is not a hard rock song. This is heavy metal. The legendary Gallop is fits right in with this song with the imagery of the song. I love the line, the horse he sweats with fear, we break to run, the mighty roar of the Russian guns. That's a great, great line. And of course, that gallop totally fits in with the whole theme of the song. And you think about the video, I always love the video for this. Whereas Run to the Hills, the video was kind of comedic. It had these
mm,
funny kind of aspects. This video was more serious, and I just love the imagery in this
mm,
video, the horses and everything. And there's a great little, very brief moment that I always look for whenever I see this video, where the guy's riding on the horse, and I believe there's like a guy, and he's dead on the ground, and he's got the British flag, I guess. He's got the
yeah, yeah,
flag,
yeah.
and the horse guy rides by, and he reaches down and he grabs the flag. That's like my favorite moment in that video. It's just such a great, like, again, where Eagles Dare made you want to run out and dive into your F whatever fighter pilot thing. This song makes you want to mount your horse and, like, charge into battle. So it just totally captures the lyrics, the music really complements the lyrics.
Mm,
It's like they're kind of one and the same.
mm,
The intro is completely legendary. I mean, this is one of those songs where, greatest metal song of all time. You could put this in the conversation as with Number of the Beast, another song that's just like one
mm,
of these legendary. When this comes on a PA system before a band starts playing in a club, everybody's, the stop and start thing at the beginning. "Do-do-do-do, you take my life, but I'll take yours too." Everybody
mm,
sings along with it. It's just great. And whoa, oh, it doesn't really have a chorus in the traditional sense. They never say
no,
the trooper or anything like
no.
that. I guess really like the whoa, whoa, whoas. Those are kind of the chorus of the song, but it's just got so much energy propelling it forward. I mean, it's really this is heavy metal. You know,
Mm.
this is what metal is all about. This kind of energy, this kind of feel. Yeah, just a fantastic burnout factor. Yes, but when they play it live, when it comes on a jukebox and you're at the bar with your buddies, when it comes on at a show over the PA system, I mean, you got to respect it. Yeah, it's just a great legendary heavy metal song. And it's a very compact song too. I mean, it comes in at, let me check my times here. The Trooper is 4:10.
Mm.
You know, it isn't the shortest song on the record, but it packs a real punch. It doesn't waste any time. Intro, the verse with the stops, then it moves on from there with the verse. The guitar solos are great, but the energy never lets up. There's never any kind of like, you know, this section's hanging around too long. You know, Iron Maiden was really dialed in at this point with very folk. I don't know if that's Martin Birch or a combination of Martin Birch and the band just being really focused on writing, getting to the point, and just really songs that really are compact but meaningful, something that they struggle with. You know, you'll hear me say and other people say that they struggle with today, where you wish they could go back to this kind of focus where they could write a four minute song that just has this much of a wallop to it.
Mm. Yeah, the burnout fact for me is huge on this one, and let's just say it. I don't think that this song. I don't really feel this song when they play it live anymore. Maybe I've heard it too many times. Maybe they don't inject the energy that this song needs since they have played it. I think it was like try to remember now. I checked this. I think it's one of maybe the fourth most played song they've ever done. And I mean, knowing that they always end all their sets with Iron Maiden, so that's the most played song.
Yeah.
So I mean, yeah, they played it quite a few times, and maybe it's just in my head, but maybe they aren't that enthusiastic about playing the Trooper anymore,
This
or
is
maybe
another
they
one
are.
that they play too fast. It's
Yeah.
another one that the tempo is perfect on the record. If there's a
Mm.
complaint I have about Nicko is that he rushes and he pushes everything and he plays everything too fast. And this is a song that it's right where it should be. If it's any faster, it starts to get, it's just too much. And when Bruce is like, "You take my life, but I'll take yours too. You fire my life, but I'll run you." It just gets too frantic. It
Yeah.
gets too out of control. It has to have that. It almost makes you wonder if Steve watched a movie with galloping horses in the battle and timed the song to that. Because really, it's like timed perfectly to, you know, what you would imagine a galloping horse to do. So when it's live and it's too fast and it just becomes like you said, they've probably played it too many times and it kind of feels like they're just trying to get through the song. It loses something for me. And Nico's drumming is kind of busy already, so when it's live and it just becomes like just too much for me.
I think actually when you listen to a lot of live versions, the problem isn't Nico, but it's actually Bruce that sings it so fast. So on
Yeah.
more than one live version I've heard about with this song, you know, it's "I'll take your life, but I'll take yours too." Do 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 do. I might want to so I run it through. Do 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 do.
Yeah.
So it's Bruce that sort of sets the
Pushing
tempo
it.
for it
Yeah.
in a bad way, I think.
Yeah.
With that said, the complaints out of the way, of course, this is a huge song for any metal fan. And the Trooper, you spoke about the lyrics. The lyrics are indeed inspired by a poem by a poet named Alfred Lord Tennyson. And the poem was like uh, some sort of debate. He wrote this and put it in a magazine in 1854, and the poem and the song deals with the Battle of Balaclava in 1854. It was the British, the French, and the Ottoman fighting the Russians in the Crimean War. And apparently, this battle was like a huge strategic failure from the British side, where they more or less sent Light Brigade into a certain death, like they sing in the song and he write in the poem. But they didn't actually lose the battle, but it was some sort of stalemate. So in the end, all these people died for literally nothing. When I was doing, I think I mentioned this before, but a few years ago, 2 years ago, we made this Martin Birch summer special with Maiden A to Z, Maiden A to C. And doing that, I took upon myself to listen to all recordings that Martin Birch had sort of, recorded, mixed, or produced. And while doing that, my jaw dropped when I listened to the 1979 solo album of Bernie Marsden. Bernie Marsden was in Whitesnake, and he put out this album with lots of famous guest musicians. And there was a break in one of these songs. It's a song called Head the Ball. This can be found on streaming services. That's where I found it. And all of a sudden, there was this break in the middle of the song where the guitars and the bass go. I mean, all the notes are there.
Wow, I never heard
And I
that. I
was
gotta
like,
check that
okay,
out.
that's a 1979 recording by Martin Birch on Bernie Marsden's solo album. Let me see. And About Time 2 is the name of the album. But I
Interesting.
mean, that was really, that made me go like, what did I just hear? I wasn't expecting that. So who knows? Maybe Steve was a bit inspired, or maybe this is just a huge coincidence. But it is very much alike. Anything else to say? I think listening to this song on the album, every time I listen to the album version, I just love the solos on this one.
Yeah.
The solos are so iconic and they're so great, but it's almost like the whole song just overshadows how good the solos are. But I mean, it's Adrian first, and then it's Dave, and it's just what a
Right. Yeah.
couple, what a
Absolutely.
power couple that is, Adrian and Dave.
Yeah.
I love this. And uh, before we go into the next one, I just want to say some trivia about the backwards message between the Trooper and the next song, Still Life. There's this backwards, not so hidden backwards message, and I think even though it's backwards, you can easily hear it's Nicko McBrain
Yeah.
that is talking, and this was made as a sort of joke directed to all people that uh, thought that Iron Maiden were like devil worshippers. So what we listen to, if you put it the right way, is Nicko saying, "What who said the thing with the three bonds? Don't meddle with things you don't understand." But he says that, and this is where it gets kind of meta, actually. So there was an album put out in the mid 70s, a comedy album with this guy called a comedian, British comedian called John Bird, and he is doing impressions of Idi Amin, the
Mm.
Ugandan dictator, military dictator. And the album is called the collected broadcasts of Idi Amin, but it's John Bird just saying weird shit,
Yeah.
but in the style. So it's Nicko McBrain doing an impression of a comedian doing an impression.
And Nicko already with his heavy accent. I think if you look on YouTube, you can find it being played forward. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah,
it's
yeah.
pretty, it's almost as hard to understand Nicko going forward as it is going
But
backwards. But
but supposedly this is a version of a Ugandan English
yeah.
accent. So well, there you go. Still
Nof
life.
nana
Over to
noof,
you.
neef nana noo, nof, noof,
Oh.
noof. Right? How many Maiden fans cannot pronounce that almost perfectly from hearing it so many times? Yeah. Now this last three songs in the album for me, these are all feel kind of like deep cuts for me. I love them. It's probably the reason why I find myself kind of gravitating towards side two of this record because of these three songs. I don't feel as burnt out on them. So Still Life, great song. Love the way it starts. It starts off kind of slow and moody. The chorus is fantastic in this. Nightmares, spirits calling me, nightmares, they won't let me be. And I love the verse, like that rhythm in the verse. Do 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 do. It's got like this sort of chugging feel to it that I think is really cool. This is a Murray Harris, right?
Mm,
Love the end, when Bruce does the nightmares, forever calling me nightmares. Now I rest in peace. Yeah, and
mm,
you can hear like a voice, I believe, right after that. There's like, yeah, or something, and it doesn't sound like
yeah.
Nico. It sounds, maybe it is Nico, but I just think that that's pretty cool. There's this sort of little voice in the back. But I've always loved kind of the feel of this song, do 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 do, when those guitars do like that sort of almost classical sounding melody type of thing. So yeah, this is a great deep cut. Bruce sounds great on it. Love his delivery in the beginning. Take a look in the pool. You know, the way he's
Mm,
singing those lines, and then it gets really big. Oh, I never felt this way. You know, those big cool drum fills
mm,
and everything. So yeah, really cool deep cut song, Still Life.
mm. It is indeed a Dave Murray song with Steve's lyrics, and as far as I understand, when Dave and Steve writes together, it seems often that I see Steve mentioning in interviews that he gets like a cassette with guitar ideas from Dave, and then Steve sort of assembles them into a song. And so is the case with this one too. And if you think about it, if there is a song on an album that starts off with a nice mellow guitar solo, it's probably a Dave song. And
Yeah.
so is the case with this one too. The lyrics is inspired by a short story by a author called Ramsey Campbell, and the novel is called "The Inhabitants of the Lake." And of course, this guy kills himself because that was too dangerous for the Korean people, so they took that off the Korean version of Peace of Mind. But this is also an early favorite of mine. I was really into this song, and I was really into Flight of Icarus, like I said before. Still Life has been like my sort of one of my deep cut choices, and I know that among many diehard fans, Still Life is is up there with like a firm fan favorite deep cut song. They only played this song on the tour, and they brought it back for the the very last few gigs on the made when they recorded the Made in England video. The song "Still Life" is on that, but they didn't play it on the whole of the tour. So when I saw my first Maiden concert in '88, I missed this song with a few weeks only, unfortunately, because they brought it in for the last part where they played the gigs in the UK. I'm sad to say, but nonetheless, it's a great song. I like Still Life, and like you said, the very beginning, the mellow beginning, and then the when the
Yeah.
drums kicks
Yeah,
in,
that's a
it
great
just
drum fill.
sounds massive. And the last verse when it goes the drum part
Yeah.
for the last verse is just amazing. Love Still Life.
Yeah, I had said I'm glad you mentioned that guitar solo at the beginning. I forgot to mention that. That's cool that it kind of starts with that sort of slow bluesy solo. I had said the last three songs on this record. I really meant the last four are kind of like deep cuts for me here because now we get Quest for Fire. Now, this is a song. I like this song. I really like the intro. The way they're all kind of playing together there. Uh, if there's this is sort of the invaders of peace of mind, and I think some people don't like Quest for Fire because of the melody lines. The same way in Invaders, the chorus "Invaders,"
Mm.
sounds a little too strange to people. This has got kind of a weird melody line. In a time when dinosaurs walked the earth, when the land was swamp and caves, whoa, Bruce jumping around in his vocal range. I think it's cool. I like it, but I do kind of get how it is kind of strange. It's a Steve Harris song. You can kind of picture Steve like almost like, let me see if I can get him to sing this, or just like deliberately writing things like this because he has a guy like Bruce in the band and he know Bruce can pull these kind of things off. But I think it's cool that they're trying to do something different instead of just in a time when dinosaurs walked the earth, when the land and swamp caves were home, in an age when prized possession was, they could have just sort of kept it
Mm.
sort of real kind of standard. Instead, he tries to do something different. Whether it works for you, I guess that's up to the individual listener. I like it. I like the feel of the song. I like the chorus. Drawn by quest for fire. Uh, I think it's got a cool feel to it. It's a little, I don't want to say throwaway song. It's not quite like Die With Your Boots On for me. I like this better than Die With Your Boots On. But again, when you're stacking the songs on this record and you've got Where Eagles Dare, Revelations, Flight of Icarus, The Trooper, maybe it doesn't quite live up to those, but in later days, due to burnout factor, again, I really enjoy songs like this because they seem kind of quirky. The melody line's a little quirky. Some of the riffs, the way they piece some of the riffs together is kind of interesting. It's like they're kind of trying something different, and maybe it doesn't work 100%, but I just think it's kind of cool. And this kind of reminds me of where they're going to go on a Power Slave with stuff like The Duelist and Flash of the Blade, these
Mm.
songs that have a lot of sort of changes to them. And it sort of makes me think of where they go with that. Maybe a little bit of their progressive edge showing through here. So
Mm. This is my least favorite song on the album, by far, even. I don't hate it. I think that it should have stayed an instrumental song because it was originally done as an instrumental. And if you think about it, it has a Transylvania.
yeah, yeah.
It's the same vibe to it, but for some reason Steve decided to put words to it, and Bruce said, I think the vocals is one thing, the way the melody jumps around, which is to my ears it is a bit contrived. It just feels like,
It's a little
why?
forced. It's a little
Yeah,
forced. Like they forced some of these parts together just for the sake of doing it. That's kind of the feel a little bit at times.
I mean, and the lyrics is, even though it's based on a film from 1982 with the same name, Quest for Fire. I mean, dinosaurs and man have never walked the earth at the same period of time. I mean, so the whole premise is, even though he just nicked it off a film, it's just ludicrous.
Huh.
And Bruce had been asked about this, and he says now that, of course, he was aware about this when he recorded it. They just thought it was a bit funny. But I mean, at the same time, if he knew about it, why didn't anyone say to Steve like, dinosaurs, man? No, no, Steve. There's a few million
Yeah.
years in between. Maybe you should rewrite this lyric, please. It will just make us come out as illiterates or something. I
I
don't know.
think back then they probably just felt like nobody's paying that much attention to these things anyways. So You
Maybe
know,
so,
who
maybe so.
cares?
And
Yeah.
it was the last song to be put on the album. And frankly, Peace of Mind has been and was for many years until very recently my favorite Iron Maiden album. But it just sort of dawned on me that Peace of Mind without Quest for Fire would have been a better album.
Yeah, I could agree with that. Even though I like Die With Your Boots On less than this. I
Mm.
think Die With Your Boots On serves a purpose on the record,
Mm.
whereas this just sounds like, yeah, it was something not quite finished that they just put it on the record. Like you said, it could have been a maybe better served as an instrumental.
Yeah, maybe so. But at the same time, I don't hate the song. I just don't think it's a very good song. And it's and I think even though Bruce is uh, he does his best to perform this song, and I think he gets away with it. But it is kind of it is a weird song, and the vocal melody is weird. It feels contrived. It doesn't feel natural. But still, as an instrumental, maybe it would have been a bit better. But it is the way it is.
Yeah. Okay, next is Sun and Steel, which is the Dickinson Smith number. This is the shortest song on the record at 3:25, which is really short for Iron Maiden when you think about it.
Mm,
Uh, I like the chorus in this. Sunlight falling on your steel, death in life is your right. That's a really catchy chorus. I mean,
mm.
I don't know who wrote that chorus. Maybe it feels a little bit like maybe an Adrian chorus, but Bruce delivers it really well. Yeah, it's a cool song. I like the feel of it. Kind of comes in pretty quick. For me, it's all about the chorus in this one. Uh, yeah, I'm okay with it.
It's not so much to say about this song, is it?
Yeah, it's just it right. This is just it kind of comes and goes. There's pretty straightforward verse, chorus, and then it's done.
Mm,
It's a pretty straightforward song. It's a pretty short song. So you can tell that the songs they put a lot of thought into were like Where Eagles Dare and Revelations and
mm.
stuff like that. Whereas this one was maybe like, hey, I've got a riff. This is a good chorus. Yeah, put it on the record, type of thing. Probably not a whole ton of thought put into it, but yeah, it's okay. It's fun. The chorus sells it for me.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's a good one. Many years ago, we had this Iron Maiden covers band, and we used to do this song, Sun and Steel. And it went down very well every time. Of course, there were a lot of Maiden diehard fans in the audience who enjoyed hearing the song live. But I think nonetheless, playing it live, it just felt so effortless. It has a good energy, good drive to it, and like you say, the chorus is really strong. I in the same time, I think it's maybe it is a short one that just goes by a bit unnoticed. But for any other band, I think a song like this would have been
Oh yeah.
a bigger song.
This would have been their lead off single.
Yeah,
Because it
probably.
is very catchy. It's like
Yeah,
if they had wanted to try to get a radio song, this could have been it. It's short,
yeah,
it's to the point, it's the very verse
yeah.
chorus type of thing.
I think it's Bruce. I think it's Bruce who came up with the chorus. He wrote the lyrics. He took the title from a 1968 book by Yukio Mishima. But the lyrics are about the life and philosophy of a Japanese swordsman, a samurai called Miyamoto Musashi, and he lived in the 17th century. But I mean, you killed your first man at 13. And when you read on, you can find this online. He has his own Wikipedia page. So if you read about his life on Wikipedia, you know, okay, at 13, he did that duel. So Bruce must have had like a book about this famous swordsman and just took out some key elements out of his life and made a song about it. So I think that makes the song a bit more cool because it could have been just a throwaway sort of song and lyric. But now with Bruce doing some research, singing about a Japanese swordsman from the 17th century, just makes it all the way more cooler for me, at least. So yeah, I really enjoy the Sun and Steel. I think they could have played this live back in the day. Uh, they did do Die With Your Boots On, of course. They did Still Life, but Quest for Fire and Sun and Steel are the only two songs that has never been played live from this very album. But I like Sun and Steel a lot.
Yeah, and maybe it does sort of set us up because we got the shortest song on the album, Sun and Steel, sets us up for the longest song on the record, which is To Tame
Mm.
a Land. Uh, and yeah, Maiden at this point now kind of famous for ending their albums with these epics. Hallowed Be Thy Name. I love this. This is a top deep cut. I know we did a video on my channel with the Maiden A to Z guys, and I think we talked about, I don't forget what the topic was, songs we'd like to see them bring back into the set that have never been played or have barely been played. And this is, of course, like next to Alexander the Great, To Tame a Land is kind of like this holy grail song that everybody would love for them to bring back.
Yeah,
I love the kind of when the intro is great, very moody, sets the whole thing up. But when it kicks into that main riff, it's like really tight and it's like this modal kind of minor key riff that has this exotic sound to it. Uh, the lyrics, at the time hadn't seen Dune. I didn't know what these meant, but it just sounded so exotic. Like he is Akira's Heradak. He is born of Caladan and will take the Gom Jabbar.
Gom Jabbar.
Yeah, I didn't know what any of this stuff meant. I remember I always like the line, without a steel suit, you would fry on the land, sand so hot and dry in a world Kamala kiss. I just thought that sounded awesome. So even though I had no idea what he was singing about, there were just all these cool lines in it, a still suit and Planet Dune and all this stuff.
Mm.
So yeah, the lyrics are great, and it's kind of that Bruce spitting out the lyrics really quick. To section where everything drops down into the time will come for him to lay claim his land is great. And then that section right after boo doo da 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 boo doo da 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 doo da da
Mm.
da 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 doo da da boo doo da 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 da. That is just so cool, man. Steve's bass is like right up there in the mix, and they're all so tight. Everybody playing that rhythm together, and then do 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 do. It goes into that other the fast section there for the guitar solos and everything. Yeah, just a great song. I love when Maiden, great way to end a record. I love when they do these epics with these different tempo changes. And again, I go back to where did these things start for me? Well, I love these kind of modal type of things like Gates of Babylon, and this has that kind of guitar riff, that main guitar riff has that feel to it, just kind of like a modal thing to it. So yeah, I absolutely love this song. Deep cut favorite, top of my list for a song that I wish they would bring back live. I mean, imagine
Mm.
if word didn't leak out that they were putting this in their set list and all of a sudden somewhere in the middle of the show this starts, right? You would just see like heads exploding, in the audience. It would be like, just people would just go absolutely nuts for it. So yeah, very, very cool way to end the record. I love when they, because this kind of combines their progressive inclinations, Steve Harris's progressive, but it's still very metal, whereas kind of this, it sounds like I'm bagging on, new Maiden. I made a comment earlier, but the new stuff, they consider it to be progressive, but it lacks sometimes this element. I wish that they pushed this element of the band more now if they wanted to be progressive, to go more
Yeah,
in this To Tame a Land direction.
yeah. I just love To Tame a Land. I think to me it's one of their absolute best songs I they've ever done. Actually, it's
Damn it.
definitely one of the better songs that Steve has ever done. And Of course, everyone knows now since we have this films. We had the David Lynch film in the 80s, Dune, and we have now the all these new films on the based on the books by Frank Herbert. Um, the book was written in 1965 and first put out. And I remember when I learned as a kid, maybe I was could have been 12, 13 or something when I went to the local library where I grew up and I borrowed this book called Arrakis ökenplaneten. Arrakis, the desert planet in Swedish. And I started to read this as a kid and I couldn't, I think maybe 3 chapters or something. There was all these weird names and things going on. I just lost interest. And actually, I've never gone back to it and read it. Maybe I should.
Yeah.
Since I'm a Maiden fan, I should read this book. But but the films they put out just a few years ago are great. And of course, all Maiden fans know all this stuff by Steve's lyrics. Of course, you don't have to read the book. It's all in Steve's lyrics. Actually, they had this spoken intro, like they have for Number of the Beast, and but to be able to use excerpts from the book, they had to get the permission from the agent of the book, and so they got in contact with Frank Herbert's agent, and he was sort of a Maiden fan, or at least he liked rock music. But he reached out to Frank Herbert, and Frank said that he didn't like popular music and not rock music, and quote, especially bands like Iron Maiden. So that was a solid no. You can't do that. He died just a few years after he recorded this song. I think he died in the 80s sometime. Frank Herbert, that is. And when they did this song live, Bruce used to do this sort of short introduction where he talked about this from stage that they wanted to call this song Dune, but the author said no and blah blah blah. And as weird as it may sound, but this the copy I've been showing is this one is an Italian copy of the 83, so it's an 83 copy of Peace of Mind made in Italy, and I don't know if you can see here.
Yeah, it was titled Dune on some of the very early pressings. Yeah.
So here it's called Dune. It's I think there is a handful different editions made in 83 that still has the original name Dune. For me, actually, I think To Tame a Land is a better title because I think it's
Yeah.
I mean, I can see why they would pick the title Dune since they're singing about the
Yeah.
book, basically. But to me, it's also maybe a bit lame, and I think it's
Yeah.
way more cool that they well they didn't choose to, they had to rename the song to Tame a Land instead. I think that's it's way more cool. You were also talking about the midsection after the more mellow bit when they go do 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 do
Yeah.
do 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 do, and that has a personally for me quite cool story to it. Many years ago, I went with my wife to Barcelona in Spain, and we met friends of my wife. And the guy that we stayed with, Oriol, he knew I was sort of a musician. He was a proper musician, a proper guitar player, playing like jazz and Spanish, what I would call Spanish guitar, I mean, classical guitar pieces on acoustic guitar. And he was and he was asking me, well, do you listen to any like classic guitar part music? And I was like, not really. So he brought out this album. It was by an American guitar player named John Williams, not the composer, but the guitar player called John Williams. And literally, the first song on the CD he put on started with do 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 do, just
Yeah.
the same notes in the same sequence, and even when it drops down, do 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 do, boom ba ba boom ba
Yeah.
boom boom ba
Yeah.
ba 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 ba. And this, so I was like, "What? This is an Iron Maiden song." And he went, "What? No, it's Asturias." It was the name of the piece. So of course we had to check this out. So the piece that must have for sure inspired Steve to that very section is music by a composer, classical composer named Isaac Albenitz, and he
Mhm.
lived and he composed this part in 1892, and the title is Asturias. Asturias. So if you just put that in your search engine for YouTube, you will definitely find classical guitar pieces. Apparently, and I just learned this very recently, because to me this is like a classic guitar piece, but actually it
Yeah.
was composed on a piano to mimic a flamenco guitar, but played on a piano.
Yeah, I can totally hear that now. I know that piece, and yeah, you're exactly right. I just never put the two of them together.
It's
Interesting.
but I mean, so when we're talking about so-called thefts or that you borrow things, to me it just sort of makes the song a bit bigger. I think of course they could have, if now Steve did steal this or borrow this, they could at least have put something on the album called including tribute
Yeah.
to or inspiration from blah blah blah, the Albanese piece, so fans could check that out. But I just think that's good. I talked previously when we were talking about Sun and Steel that my Iron Maiden covers band, and we also used to do this song to Tame a Land. And it have you ever tried to play this on the bass?
Yeah,
It
it's
is
hard. Yeah.
it's very labor intensive. I mean,
Yeah.
it's hard to play technically, and it's also like an endurance test.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't think even that the part that do 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 do, I mean that's pretty fast, so you have to have your chops right. But when you go into the next part that
Doodle
do do
doodle
do do
doodle
do do,
doodle doodle
and
doodle
you're
doodle.
holding like
Yeah.
a two-string chord,
Yeah.
and you know,
Yeah.
your thumb after playing that for a while, it's
Yeah.
like I just get
Yeah.
cramps. So it's an awful song to play, but it is a wonderful song to listen to. I just love it, and the way it ends with a gong, and
Hmm.
the way it just rings out. I love it. I love this song, To Tame a Land.
Masterpiece.
And
Yep.
like you said, if they were to bring this back for this tour, and I mean, Bruce have said in interviews that they are planning to play some songs that they have, quote, never played before, and some they haven't
Hmm.
played for many, many years. So To Tame a Land, it's right up there on my list.
Yeah.
So should we talk just a few
Yeah.
words about the singles?
Yes. Tell us about the singles, and I'll let you get that started.
Yeah. Just a few weeks before the actual album was put out, they put out the single for Flight of Icarus on the 11th of April 1983. And I have here a so-called picture disc, 12-inch picture disc of said single. And like you said in the introduction, the B side is a song called "I Got the Fire" that they had already recorded once live with Paul Diano on vocals, a live version. And to me, that live version is like the definite Maiden version of that song, and it's one of the best covers that the band has ever recorded. This one is a studio version, of course, with Bruce and Nicko and Adrian in the band. Uh, but the perhaps the most trivia interesting thing for everyone out there, and let me see here if I can show you this. Up here, so if you got your copy in front of you, if you're listening, and above the burning angel, there is a small cube. Can you see that
Yeah.
in the sky? So what is that? according to the interview in your friend Martin's book, the Derek Riggs book, uh, Derek Riggs came up with the idea of uh, the cube being the padded cell. And as you can
Ah,
see on the back here, there's a door
yeah.
open on the album sleeve where the door is open. And maybe, yeah, maybe the sky inside the open door is like the one here that we see on the sleeve for Flight of Icarus. And I think this is a very cunning way too, that here we have like Eddie and he's flying over hell, which goes back to the images they put out for Number of the Beast. But also then you put in this little cube, which is in indirect is like a sort of a nod to the sleeve
Wow,
that
that's a real Easter egg there, man. I never
that's
noticed
really
that.
Easter egg. No one, I didn't know this until I read this interview. It was like,
Yeah.
yeah, because as a kid, even, when you're a kid, you go through all the sleeves looking on every detail because it's Derek Riggs and there are always these Easter eggs. But I could never ever figure out what is that cube doing in the
Yeah.
sky on Flight of Icarus until I read this interview where Derek was talking to Martin Popoff about this, and I think that is so cool. What do you think about this version of "I Got the Fire"?
Uh, I mean, these B-sides are cool. I don't really have any preference. I agree with you. I think the live version is better. I don't, to be honest with you, I don't really think about these too much. They're fun. They're fun now to have them all in one place. I know they put out a best of the B-sides or beast of the B-sides or something. So it's
Mm.
kind of cool to have all these in one place. Do I listen to them a lot? No, not really. I think what's more interesting about these is the different cover art that you got from these with the singles. I almost never, quite honestly, listen to these.
And talking about cover art, this is a singles cover, and this is a. I'm now holding up the single. This is a maxi single, 12-inch single, a German edition,
Of the Trooper, right, which is a
with the Trooper.
legendary image. Yeah, this
Yeah,
image. Yeah.
you could imagine any other heavy metal or hard rock band in the world to have a detailed cover of this quality
Yeah,
for their album, and this
right.
is like a single throwaway image.
Yeah.
It's
It's
really
and it's
weird.
become maybe one of their more iconic images, Eddie with the Union Jack,
Yeah, yeah.
image there. That's one of their probably top five most iconic images of the band. When they play the song, a lot of times that's on a backdrop behind them.
And talking about Derek Riggs Easter eggs, if you have like collections or if you can find online different singles and so on, the the hand that just is like reaching out on the bottom here of the sleeve, if you try to find, you have this this hand on so many Maiden sleeves. You can find a version of it on the Somewhere in Time sleeve. You can find
Wow.
you can find a version of it on the Strangers in a Strange Land single sleeve. Anyway, the Trooper was put out in June the 20th of 1983, so they were well on tour by then. And the B side is Cross Eyed Mary, which is, like you said, from the 1971 Jethro Tull album Aqualung, which is a very famous one. And apparently, the band made a point out of not recording one of their most famous Jethro Tull songs. Steve and Bruce are both huge Jethro Tull fans. And Cross Eyed Mary, I think, is a sort of a deep cut fan favorite of theirs to record.
Yeah.
Uh, uh, and also, it's been well documented that they sort of recorded this without rehearsing it first with Bruce. So when they asked, "Can we do it in this key?" and Bruce said, "Yeah, that'll be fine." And then when he got in front of the microphone to actually record the vocal parts for Cross-Eyed Mary, it was like, "Hit it up for
Yeah,
me."
he sings it an
It's
octave
very high.
higher than Ian Anderson, which puts it way up into not that Ian Anderson has a very sort of bass baritone voice. So for Bruce to really have any punch and power to it, he probably felt I got to take this up an octave. And yeah, it sounds like it's really straining and pushing Bruce's range, but it's still cool, you know.
And to me as a kid, this is just some really worthless bonus information for you out there. But as a kid, I had no idea about Jethro Tull when I first heard this. It wasn't anywhere in my part of the world as a kid, and I just looked on the label of the single. It says I Anderson, and to me, Anderson, that's a Swedish name. So
Yeah.
as a when can I? Maybe I was 11 or something when I bought this single. I was like, so they have a song by a Swedish artist called E. Andersson. I wonder who that is. It just
That's
took a few
funny.
more years for me to find out that it was, of course, a Jethro Tull song. But I mean, like you said, talk about, and we always mention like the low information
Yeah.
age. But I have never read, even though there were like interviews in, like the magazine I mentioned in the beginning of this pod, OK, but they never talked about B sides of singles in those interviews. So I had no idea about. I
Yeah.
understood they weren't Iron Maiden songs because I could see that. Okay, this I Anderson, he is not in the band, so it must
Yeah.
be by someone else. But I mean, yeah, it's silly, but it's funny.
I actually like,
I just love this song. I think their rendition of Cross-Eyed Mary is great. The
yeah,
way that they have like the flute thing, they
play it
transfer
on the
that to the
guitar.
guitar.
Yeah,
It
the
just
little
sounds
trills.
great. Yeah.
Yeah, it really works. And I was a Jethro Tull fan before I heard their version of it. So I was familiar with the song. And this song, actually, if you know, I try to think if I've ever really heard Iron Maiden on standard classic rock radio here. This song actually got a little bit of radio play
Mm.
on classic rock radio, which was fascinating. But yeah, I always kind of dug this one because I'm a big Jethro Tull fan. So
And it's funny you mentioned that, John.
mhm.
So, so for some reason, American rock radio picked up on this version and they played it. So the American label Capitol Records, they want to put Cross-Eyed Mary on Peace of Mind. Of course, the band said, "No, it's a cover song. It's a B-side. This is not our music. We only have our Maiden music on our Maiden albums." But the label did a sneaky thing because on this picture disc version of Peace of Mind, it the last song on side one is indeed Cross-Eyed Mary.
Wow. Was that
So this is
released in 83, that picture
yeah,
disc?
it was released in '83,
Oh wow.
and since it has this different cover, for you who are only listening on streaming services, the cover for the album, the picture disc, is not the one that you see on the very album itself, but
Yeah,
this is the illustration for tour posters and tour programs for World Peace Tour. So for
interesting.
me as a kid, this was like one of the when I started to collect, this was one of the records I most wanted to have, and of course, it's the only official Maiden release album that they have cover songs on.
Interesting. Very interesting.
Mhm.
All right. Well, there you go. Iron Maiden, Peace of Mind. You got any final thoughts before we wrap this up?
It's, again, like I said in the beginning of this episode, it's we've talked a lot, and the way I feel about it is it's so ingrained in me. It's like this is one of, and I know these are like big words, but it really is one of the pillars of me in a
Yeah.
way, just the way it sort of directly or indirectly shaped a huge part of my life, becoming a musician, like I said, going to places, meeting people, getting friends, everything which is of course attributed, I could attribute to Iron Maiden, but if you narrow it down, it all began with Peace of Mind. Peace of Mind was the album that just pull me in, and it hasn't released me yet. It's still Peace of Mind still holds me in its grip, so to
Yeah.
speak. So, is it a hugely important album to me? Yes. Uh, do I like the album? I mean, you can have like nostalgic reasons for different, like a movie or an album, without and also knowing that it's not perhaps the best film or the best record
Yeah.
you've ever heard in your life. But when it comes to Peace of Mind, I would say this is one of my top favorite albums. The sound of the album, the mix, Martin Birch production,
Yeah.
it's all so 5 out of 5. It is just an amazing album, and I've used it in my own creative way as a songwriter and for my band Dead Cosmonaut. I even made like a nod to Peace of Mind when we put out the first Dead Cosmonaut album. I used the same fonts for the
Yeah.
lyrics and the titles
Nice.
on Expect Nothing. I mean, uh, and that was something I decided long before I actually even had like a deal to put it out. It was like it would be called Expect Nothing, and I will use the fonts that they had for Peace of Mind just as a tribute. Hugely important, and I enjoy it.
Yeah, same. It's an important album to me in my metal journey. It's almost like an arrival album, like where it feels like, yeah, heavy metal for me just really this is when it really landed for me. It's an important album for Iron Maiden. It's an important album for heavy metal in general. So. Okay. Well, like Matthias mentioned, he has a band called Dead Cosmonaut. You can check them out on all the streaming services. I have my YouTube channel, Layer of the Alchemist, and where I talk all things heavy metal and hard rock. You can find that on YouTube. I do a podcast with Martin Popoff called Kicked Into Teeth, an AC/DC podcast. I do a Black Sabbath podcast with my friend Darren called Into the Void, a Black Sabbath podcast. Those are available on all the streaming services. We'd like to thank everybody out there for listening, and we'll see you the next one, Power Slave. So we'll see you out there somewhere in time.
Bye bye.